The Starship's fifth test flight might not happen anytime soon as the brawl between SpaceX and the Federal Aviation Administration deepens. While SpaceX is adjusting its most sophisticated rocket, the Super Heavy, to circumvent the FAA, it still can't escape its wrath, and the Starship has to suffer for it. Would the FAA destroy SpaceX's big plans for the Starship? What does SpaceX plan to do about it? Let's answer all these and more in today's video. Starship's launch disaster. No FAA license? I don't think I need to take you back to the glorious design of the Starship, including its monstrous beauty of a rocket and its outer body layout that just hits the bullseye of shuttle bodywork. Among its first to fourth test flights, the last two have both been quite successful. We can't say the same for the first and second test flights. A good side to these test flights, whether successful or explosive, would be that they encourage SpaceX to be much better than it was before. You are very welcome to the Space Minds channel. Just hit the subscribe button so you don't miss the launch of any of our new videos. And also, don't forget to ring the bell so you can get notified every time we post. Before the Starship is declared SpaceX's best candidate for the Mars race and also Earth's super advanced space shuttle of millennials, it has to successfully pass its fifth test flight. This is where the FAA comes in. The fifth test flight may not happen soon. The FAA has been reluctant to grant SpaceX a license to perform the fifth test flight of the Starship. This stems from the FAA's concerns over the environmental safety of the launch. According to SpaceX, the Starship has been ready to fly since the early part of August, but the licensing issue with the FAA would put it on hold till late November. This would significantly slow the progress of the Starship. The FAA is known for being extremely slow in processing licenses for launches, and it gets worse when it comes to SpaceX. Why so? The FAA has had multiple issues with SpaceX, especially due to the latter's unauthorized missions. Two of these, the launch of PSN Satria on June 18, 2023, and the launch of EchoStar 14 on July 28th, have riled up the FAA, causing it to file a $630,000 fine against SpaceX. One of these launches, the EchoStar mission, was done on the same propellant farm where NASA's Crew 7 mission was launched, which was approved by the FAA. This brings up an important question. Why was approval not given for the EchoStar but was given for Crew 7? SpaceX came out publicly to criticize the overly slow license processing of the FAA and its unfair bias against the space company. The unofficial matters of the bias have sparked concerns within the shuttle industry and worldwide, causing suspicions to cloud the FAA rules. It gets worse when you realize that the FAA didn't exactly say much on Boeing's Starliner disaster, where the expected one-week crewed mission of the Boeing spacecraft has turned into months of nightmare for the crew. They were abandoned at the International Space Station. No fines for the company, Boeing, which abandoned its crew in space, but the all-successful perfect record SpaceX is receiving more than $500,000 worth of fines over seemingly insignificant rules. That's really unsettling. It gets worse realizing that of all three charges the FAA had against SpaceX, one of these so-called violations wasn't exactly a violation. It wasn't even a rule of the FAA. The readiness poll issue was based on an important preliminary step done before any launch, but it wasn't a rule in the FAA books. So why would the FAA fine SpaceX over something that wasn't exactly a rule? Nah, I believe that the SpaceX FAA clash is more about an internal conflict between both institutes than the violation charges they show. Anyway, whatever the exact reason behind the brawl is, it is really affecting the Starship's future. The FAA Administrator Michael Whitaker, while replying to the United States House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure Subcommittee on Aviation on the case of Starship's launch delay, explained that it was not the fault of the FAA and it was not based on any bias. He blamed the delay on SpaceX's failure to provide an updated sonic boom analysis within the timeframe for the launch, thus adding 30 more days to the FAA's license process as a consequence. Let me simplify it for you. SpaceX hasn't provided an updated report on how the sonic boom generated by the Starship would affect the ground. While this report is extremely important, it is unarguably the least of concerns, especially considering that the launch would be done on a site far away from residential areas and wildlife. But of course, it remains an important rule of the FAA. SpaceX has to abide by it. Aside from this, Whitaker also argued that SpaceX violated Texas environmental laws of spacecraft launches, thus discouraging the FAA from granting the license in a letter directly to the head of the United States House Subcommittee on Workforce Protections. SpaceX countered this, stating that the allegation is simply wrong and that the FAA administrator lacked accurate information on the licensing issue. The company also went on to state that it did obtain a permit for deluge operations from the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, TCEQ. This permit is essential for SpaceX's launches as it approves its use of the surrounding water to cool the launch pad and prevent fires, and also acknowledges that the space company protects natural resources like air and water quality while performing its launches. Speaking about Whitaker on X, formerly called Twitter, Elon Musk says he needs to resign. The whole thing is now a really big issue. Anyway, these issues between the FAA and SpaceX over the Starship's launch, as well as other issues they've had in previous years, have resulted in the slow development of the Starship as the shuttle of the future. The license, especially with the current feud between both sides, may not be given until 2025, and SpaceX might have to wait peacefully or, otherwise, go legal. What is SpaceX's next move? While the option to wait for the FAA's license doesn't seem so bad, it has its perks. The Starship has met almost 3 years' worth of delays, and another wait could do huge damage to its future. SpaceX would have to readjust its plans again, making the public lose trust in its ability to provide a brilliant space shuttle that could take it to the Moon or to Mars. Then again, the option of going legal might place things under a lot of heat. If SpaceX loses to the FAA, it would have to pay a fine more than $630,000, while also having to admit claims of violating the FAA. It would get much more disappointing because the public would start to believe that the space company cares more about their shuttles than they do for public safety. This would be a crazy downfall for Elon Musk's public image. They will still get the license of the Starship, maybe earlier than expected even, but it would come at a lot of cost, both financially and on the matter of dignity. But what's on the other side of the table? If the FAA loses to SpaceX, it would have to provide the Starship's license and pay SpaceX for damages, both to its public name and its planned missions. We haven't spoken about scrutiny and criticism that would come from the government over the FAA processes and activities. The FAA would also lose public trust, and its entire cabinet might be ousted for a new team of officials. It would be a really heavy blow to the current committee of the administration. Whatever will happen, it all lies in what SpaceX decides. What could this mean for the Starship? In light of their ongoing issues, SpaceX and the FAA may have to take a time out to address things. For the Starship, this wouldn't be good. If the Starship's 5th flight isn't performed early, at least before 2024 runs out, the spacecraft's planned journeys may take a thorough rescheduling, especially because the craft hasn't even performed its first crewed flight. But this isn't the first time the Starship would have its planned timeline rescheduled. Actually, it's not the second or third. The Starship has been ready for its test flights since 2021, but this was moved to 2022 for reasons unknown. In 2022, owing to safety concerns of the FAA regarding its mission, the Starship had to remain grounded for several months, even till the end of the year. In 2022, however, SpaceX and the FAA started to bruise each other's skin. Issues came up regarding the FAA's slow way of processing licenses, and SpaceX had to wait till 2023 before they got a license for the Starship's first test flight. The FAA's fears came to pass, as the first 2 test flights of the Starship, both performed in 2023, recorded huge failures and minimal successes. By huge failures, I mean explosive failures. You can check out my video on the Starship's 5th test flight countdown. I detailed all of the previous test flights of the craft in that video. In the middle parts of 2024, the Starship's third and fourth test flights got their licenses and were performed. Though the third flight wasn't entirely successful, recording an explosion of its booster, the fourth flight was a beautiful event. You could imagine Elon Musk's smile. SpaceX was finally on the right lane. The fifth test flight is meant to ascertain the credibility of the Starship and its super heavy booster, while also showing the world that SpaceX didn't renege on its promise of making mankind multi-planetary. With the current issues over its license, this promise might have to wait, as well as all other journeys promised by SpaceX. We don't know when it could all be resolved, nor do we know when the Starship would perform its fifth liftoff. All in all, we pray it happens soon. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to Space Minds for the latest updates on our space news and adventures.